Today, you will learn Module 3. This is the first part of the accounting cycle. You will learn how to identify events to be recorded by gathering information about transactions or events through source documents. That is step number 1 of the accounting cycle. Record these events in a general journal by preparing journal entries. Step number 2. Post these entries to a general ledger or to a T account. And that is step number 3. But here, you will only learn about the preparation of the general ledger preparation or posting the journal entries to the ledger, because you'll have already discussed how to prepare the T account in module number 2. And the last one for this module, you will check the equality of the accounting equation by preparing the trial balance. Actually, when we prepared the financial transaction worksheet, the bottom figures or the totals that we computed, that we checked if that assets is equal to liabilities and capital is being maintained. And that is here, we don't do that anymore, but we prepare the trial balance. So a formal statement, no? Checking the equality of the accounting equation. Lesson number 1, we will be discussing 2, the transaction analysis and the preparation of the journal entries. So these are the steps for transaction analysis. Number 1, identify the transaction from source documents. So we need to have a source documents for a transaction to be recorded in a general journal. In accounting class, actually in reality, there are really those that does not have any source documents. Like when you pay for the fare or pliti, no? Kasi ay magdadaya pa ko ng voucher. But of course, those who will be sent to travel, no, will be the one who will bring with them the source documents, of course. Or bisan, hindi necessary na magdaya sila, but when they go back to the office, they need to prepare that source documents. Number 2, indicate the accounts either assets. So we need to identify them, no? It's either they are assets, liabilities, equity, income, or expense, no? Are these accounts or any of these accounts are affected by the transaction will be the question. Next, ascertain whether each account is increased or decreased by the transaction, because it will help you determining whether it is increased or the account is increased or decreased by the transaction, because it will help you identify which one is to be debited and which one is to be credited. Take note, class, for every transaction, for every set of transaction or journal entries, there will always be 2 accounts affected, no, minimum 2 accounts to be affected. One is the debit and one is a credit. The number 4, using the rules of debit and credit, determine whether to debit or credit the account to record its increase or decrease. I will expound this one, no, the step number 4, later on when we prepare the journal entries. No? Before doing that, before recording the journal entries, first, let's have the review on the rules of the debit and credit. And the one that I've said, that every debit is always equal to the value received, and all value parted with are credit entries. No, I have already introduced that one to you, and this really helped me a lot during my college. No, that for every transaction, The value received is a debit entry and the value parted with is a credit entry. So I have also here in this module, I started attaching a video reference from the YouTube. No, you may copy the link and then search it in YouTube. So it's up to you. Source documents. Actually, we have already taken up this one in module number 1. No, I don't know, was it really module number 1? No, module number 2. So these are the source documents that supports for every journal entries that you're going to prepare. So these are the supporting documents. The source documents are actually the supporting documents for you to record every transaction, no, in the general journal. So these are, no, examples: customer supplier sales invoices, official receipts. So actually, when do you use sales invoices and when do you use official receipts is always a question. And most of the establishments, stores here, no, are really are confused whether when to issue a sales invoice and when to issue official receipts. Is a sales invoice a valid document as a sale transaction? Yes. No? But usually the official receipts class would be an issuance of which is due to a transaction or a sales invoice that was previously issued and it is on a credit. No? Kung utang siya, then later on kung magbayad na, no, official receipt will be used to be issued. That official receipts, no, are actually here. Of course, kung tindahan, sales invoice, pero kung ang tindahan sa at the same time, as I've said, mag-issue sila ng official receipt kung nakautang and then nagbayad ng customer. But here, the definition with the book that official receipts are used for the sale of services. Yes, no? Basically, kung services and imo tag-offer, there is nothing to enumerate. What are the goods that you sell? No, that's why you don't. When you offer services, you don't issue sales invoice, but instead you issue official receipts. Next, we have the purchase order. So it's a document issued by a buyer to a seller indicating the types. The types, quantities, and agreed prices for products and services that the buyer intends to purchase. So kung magpalit, amo dyan purchase order, no? And then, kung, for example, after the purchase order was issued and then tag-deliver na non-supplier at imo tag-pang-order, then you will issue a receiving report. No? So it is a document containing information about goods received from a vendor. It formally records the quantities and description of the goods delivered. Is it really necessary to have a receiving report? No? For some establishments like sa NEMCO Dili na, we don't do that. No? What we record for as basis of the purchase, no, not really the purchase order, but the delivery receipts of the sales invoice now is being used, no? Next, delivery receipt, no, an alternative. This supports your receiving report. Then you have the cash voucher or check voucher. No, when you pay your suppliers or you pay, suppliers or anyone, no, that has that you are accountable to, that you have an obligation to pay. So of course, the supporting document will be the cash voucher or the check voucher. Then the petty cash voucher, this is the one that I've said, that the source document kung magpliti, instead of issuing a check, no, the business establishment will just issue or prepare a petty cash voucher. So from the word petty cash, ang ginagmay small amount of expenses is being used in the issuance of this type of document. So petty amounts, so ginagmay na amounts. Check, no, of course, as I've said, if the business establishment uses imprest system wherein aton gani may petty cash fund, no, for small expenditures and for expenditures beyond, no, the limit for the petty cash fund expenditure, then check will be issued. No? For example, the company may opt to have a policy that only less than 1,000 will be issued for petty cash funds, and beyond 1,000 should now be issued with a check. Now, that is also one of an internal control that a business establishment or an entity, no, will imply, or I mean, will employ, no, in order to have control. Then deposit slips, no, a deposit slip should need to be validated as an evidence, no, as a source document. Dili pwede adton dili siya na validate because it may be construed na taglahi. Actually, there is a case here that I have audited one establishment here in Surigao. What happened? Dili validated the deposit slip because the claim of that in charge is offline, but only to found out that this deposit slip or the deposit amount was not reflected in the bank account. No? When I audited, I checked the bank account against the deposit slip, so there were really missing entries. No? O sa importante ga jud, bisan mo laong na offline at the time na nikadto kita, for example, ang in charge, but kinahanglan, at the end of the day, di man pwede na dili ka dyan mag-online ang isa ka bangko. Dapat huyaton and then i-collect, no, on a later date. O bisan dapat in the afternoon, no, on the date of the deposit. Because kung imo i-prolong pa na dili nimo, ano pa ini, dili nimo i-collect aton the validated deposit slip, there may be something that is wrong with the transaction. So dapat jaon, no? That example of the validated deposit slip, aton machine validation, ini, no? Then the bill of lading, this is a document issued by a carrier, tracking, shipping, or airline that specifies contractual conditions and terms of delivery such as freight terms, time, place, and the person named to receive the goods. So kung kibali, if you buy goods and then imo isakay sa doon sa tracking or sa shipping company or sa airline, so they will really issue you a bill of lading. Then the statement of account, no, ton manukot na kao, or for utilities, iton mga water bill, di ba, mga electric bill, water bill, di ba, they will issue you statement of account, no? And this will support also as a source document. Credit memorandum is a form used by the seller to notify the buyer that this account is being decreased due to errors or other factors requiring adjustments. So, kung umano yung mga credit memorandum, kibali on the part of the supplier, di ba nangutang kao, no? Nangutang kao. So, on the books of the supplier, it is an accounts receivable. That accounts receivable has a normal balance of debit. So when they are going to reduce your utang with them, no, or they will deduct a certain portion, certain amount from your accounts, your obligation to that supplier, they will issue you a credit memorandum. Now, maybe for, let's say, there's an adjustment on the delivery of the goods. For example, ni claim ka na, ini defective naman or expired naman ini o matag-deliver man ka, no? Then of course, that supplier will issue you a credit memorandum. Or, bisa nag-GP ra class, when you are going to sell it in the store, sa imo, for example, ikaw si buyer, tapos ibaligya sa nimo sa imo store. Kung mga GP, di ba di naman kasagaran nato ginadawat, no? So it is also one reason why you will be issued with a credit memorandum when you return goods to the supplier or seller. Then the bank statement is a report by a bank. This is on a monthly basis. This time lamang sa class, the bank statement is no longer given. No, I mean, it is only given upon request. So kung kibalik ko man good online na class, all statements are already available online. So if you want a hard copy, then you need to have a request before this document will be given to you. Or you need to have a certain period of time, they will say 5 days, no, for the bank to be able to give you a hard copy of the bank statement. But of course, there are actually also banking institutions that really gives out their bank statement, no, at the end of every month. But of course, dili kon, for example, if it is for the month of June, dili da dyan sa June 30 available ang bank statement. The bank will give, the bank will be given, or it would be a certain period of time from the end of the month that the bank statement is available for claim. So here now is the 10 accounting cycle. Ato ra lamang aton source documents, although it was already discussed in module 2. Ako ra tagbalik for you to be able to for your guide that the recording process ba dili ra lamang i-record ang transaction kung wala source document. So meaning to say, there should always be a source document for you to record the transactions in the general journal of a certain business establishment or an entity. This is the 10 accounting cycle. So every year, this cycle is being done or prepared or performed, no? From step 1 up to step number 9, no? Step number 10, manggod class, is done on the first accounting period of the next accounting period. I mean, step number 10 is prepared on the next accounting period. So, kibali ko the first day of the next accounting period would be January 1. For example, if this is 2021, so gikan January, you perform step number 1, no? Gikan January, you perform step number 1, and then you perform also step number 3. For example, if your summary, dili ko computerized, the summary is made only at the end of the year, no? So during the accounting period, gikan January to December, you perform step 1, 2, and 3. And the preparation, or step number 4 up to step number 9 is performed at the end of the accounting period. Meaning to say, kung calendar year, step 4 to step 9 are performed on December 31, on any year. Okay? So, jari, and step 1 to 3, gikan January to December, no, of the same year, na applicable accounting period. But the step number 4 to 9 is performed only at the end of an accounting period. But if the company uses, or if the company policies that at the end of the month, they will record, no, they will prepare the worksheet, no? I mean, this is not really necessary. The preparation of worksheet is not really necessary on a monthly basis, no? But of course, if that is the company's policy, then so be it, no? You prepare that one. Lamang kay tedious, trabahoso, if every month, kung manual pa ang business establishment. Meaning, the system, the computerized accounting system is not yet computerized. Mas kuti, no? Mas kuti. So you have it there, step number 10, no, is done on the next accounting period. So kibali, as I've said, step 1, for example, for this year, January, no? So for 2021, and step number 10 is in the year January 1, 2022, or any date on the first accounting, first office, no? On the next accounting period of 2022. Di ba kay holiday man ang January 1, okay ra kung ang January, okay ra kung computerized accounting system because the system will generate that the reversing entries is really performed on January 1. No? But then, kung manual, of course, dili siya kung January 1. Okay? Because January 1 is a holiday, no? Depende kung ano yung first banking or office day nan the following year, no? That may also be valid. This cycle is repeated each accounting period. So aton kada tuig, no, they are performed every year. The first 3 steps, as I've said, no, aton for during the period January to December. So I have here so gikan the general journal, actually itong step number 1 up to step number 4, no? Jari kibali. Gikan, of course, when you analyze the transactions after analysis, that you have already the source documents, you record the transaction in the general journal, or this is what we call the preparation of the journal entries. So you have there, for example, if the entry is debit to office equipment, then the XXX there class represents the amount. Of course, waya dili is necessary for discussion na lamang ini. So cash, then a credit to cash and credit to accounts payable. So then it is posted to the general ledger, no? So the office equipment is posted to the general ledger na office equipment, the cash is posted to the cash general ledger, and the accounts payable is also posted to the accounts payable general ledger. That remember in the general ledger class, all accounts are assigned, no, with a page in the general ledger. Or atun sa T account, remember that the general ledger, no, in alternative, the preparation of the T account is being used, no. But here, as I've said in module 3, I will no longer discuss to you the T account because it has already been discussed in module 2. So general ledger now, because that is the most acceptable, or that is the real life recording, no, general ledger or the ledger dili na kon T account. So di ba sa T account nato, tanan account titles are assigned with each separate T account. So pareho ra sa general ledger gihapon. So after, no, the posting, di ba remember sa T account nato, we determine the balances. Of course, sa general ledger also, we will determine the balance. And then when you now check the equality of your work, of your posting to the ledger, you prepare the trial balance. Now, this is the last thing that we're going to do in module number 3. Okay, so before I will discuss to you the journal entries, let me refresh you with the accounting equation that assets are equals to liabilities plus capital. And all assets have a normal balance of debit, and all liabilities and capital accounts have a normal balance of credit. But take note that under capital account, it is affected by other accounts like the capital account itself, the income or the sales account, the expense account, and the withdrawal account. that, remember, what will happen to the capital account if there is an investment made by the owner, the capital account is increased. No? If there is an investment of the owner, then the capital account is increased. And if there is income or sales, the capital also is increased by the account. But expenses will decrease capital and withdrawals will also decrease capital. So when in the accounting equation, no, I said that the capital account has a normal balance of credit. So take note that if that account increases capital, so meaning to say the normal balance of that account is credit. Sorry. So the normal balance of that account is credit. So there is have income or sales, so the normal balance is also credit. And for expense, since they decrease capital, so the normal balance is debit. So the same with withdrawals. Sorry. So since it decreases capital, so the normal balance is debit. So here, class, the account capital is now expanded, no? That when we prepare the journal entries, we need to record in the specific account. Is it a capital account? Is it an income or sales account? Is it an expense account or a withdrawal account? Okay, ana siya. So take note that the normal balance of these accounts are this. That for example, if the assets is being decreased in the transaction, kay debit man ija normal balance, and then the effect of the transaction decreases the asset, then the entry to that asset account will be credit. No? So, ang ila kibalig, for example, liabilities. So, to increase liabilities, dapat the entry is credit. To decrease liabilities, or if the transaction decreases liabilities, then the entry should be debit. And then for expenses and withdrawals, since they decreases capital, but the normal balance are debit, no? Kung debit siya, decreases are always on the credit or a credit entry. While capital or income decreases are debit entry. So dapat, kung if the account is decreased by the transaction, kung ano yung normal balance debit, so the entry should be credit. But if the normal balance of the account is credit, but if the transaction in your transaction analysis, it is decreased by in the transaction, then you debit that account. Okay, ana siya. Or, simply put, as I've said, that you need to learn that all value received is equals to a debit entry and all value parted with is a credit entry. Balikon ko, kung mo lang kita value received, aton value na mo na receive. It's either an asset or a benefit. No? Like an expense. Di ba remember that above, nag-mention ako that expenses have a normal balance of debit. No? Okay, because when we record this expense, we debit the account. No? So assets, increases in assets are debit entries. Decreases in liabilities are also debit entries. And increases in expense and withdrawal are also debit entries. So, for the value parted with, no? Kung mangutang ka, liabilities, that is a initial increase, no? The entry should be credit. But when you pay this account, kung bayaran na nimo dyan na utang, ang imo entry should be credit. Ang labit ako kanina that under value received, it's a benefit or the decrease in your or obligation or liabilities. Okay, so when you receive income also at the same time, then since it increases capital, then the entry should always be credit. Okay, the journal or the general journal. The journal is a chronological record of the entity's transactions. A journal entry shows all the effects of a business transaction in terms of debits and credits. Each transaction is initially recorded in a journal rather than directly in the ledger. A journal is called the book of original entry. The nature and volume of transactions of the business determine the number and type of journals needed. The general journal is the simplest journal. Again, a journal is called the book of original entry, and the general journal is the simplest journal. So the format, when you record the transaction in a general journal, you record the date first, no? So the year and the month are not rewritten for every entry unless the year and the month changes on a new page is needed. So account titles, there should be account titles. The account title to be debited is entered at the extreme left of the line, while the account to be credited is entered slightly indented on the next line. A brief description of the transaction is usually made on the line below the credit. Generally, skip a line after each set of entries. Kibalikon, human ako ng May 1, dyan na say May 1 na isa, after recording the debit and credit entries for the first May 1, dapat dyan space, bakante, sa ejo columnar notebook, dili suyatan anay, bakantihan, and before you start with another May 1 transaction recording. So the posting reference, when you record this one to the ledger, to the general ledger, the posting reference is the page number where that account is posted in your general ledger. So debit amount, and the credit amount is being recorded also. So that is the format. Actually, I have an example here below. So atong date, how is the date? Dapat dyan pagkadyo year, Okay, of course, kung tagsumpay-sumpay rani mo si class, especially for those accounts that does not require na every year si mag-change, So dapat there should always be a year, and then the month and the applicable date. Dapat doon one class, John May ra dapat din on sa column na dako-dako sa under date. Dapat an one dali diri sa small, nasaya ako siguro. Tanaw diri sa diri amo ni sakto to May 5 jari na gud sa gamay. Okay. So simple and compound entry. In a simple entry, only two accounts are affected. One account is debited and the other account is credited. So ini an example of a simple entry na isa ra ka debit, isa ra ka credit, then the explanation. Okay, you have here, okay, balik ana ko diri. Account titles and explanation aton format kibali ng entry. So the debit, sagad siya sa margin. You have to take note na sagad siya sa margin. Hindi ako ganahan na maghatag ka mo ng space. Ijo bakantihan amoranan sa margin na ni abanti pa kaw gamay para ka mag-record ng debit, dili ako gusto nako nan isagad gadyo niyo sa margin para an ijo indention would now be credit. Dire naka-credit ako, naka-indent, no? And then take note that the accounts are always on the first letter of that account title is capital, no? Dili siya pwede ng small letter or all capital. And then initial investment, actually this is the explanation, but remember that for every entry you need to have to present or to write an explanation. That the explanation should be brief, that it explains really the transaction, what the transaction is all about. And the posting reference, wala pa man because we have not yet posted this one to the ledger. So blanco pa siya. But later on, when you are done with the journal entries, and then we perform now the posting to the ledger, then there should now be the posting reference to be filled up. Or the posting reference should now be filled up. So you have the column, another column for debit, and another column for credit. So the debit entry, no, dapat kung debit siya, dapat ibutang ang amount sa debit column, sa under amount, and kung credit and ija entry, dapat the amount should also be placed on the credit column amount. Okay? So this is an example of a simple entry, and a compound entry, jarida, that there is more than one debit or more than one credit, no? Or more than one debit or more than one credit in one transaction only. So ini duha ka debit sa duha ka credit. Uman debit man naglaw ko na debit because dari sila nasagad, no? Sa margin. So as I've said, all debits are always written first and all credits are indented from your debit entry. So naka-indent siya, and also your explanation is also indented on the next line after the credit entries. So two amounts also to be recorded on the debit column for office equipment and supplies, and also two accounts, no? Since it has two accounts here in the compound entry, then also two amounts to be recorded in the credit column. Okay, now, so let's now analyze. We are now on step number 2, that the transactions are journalized. After the transactions or event has been identified or analyzed and measured, of course, it is recorded in the journal. The process of recording a transaction is called journalizing. The following are the transactions for wedding are asked during the month of May. The double entry system will be used. Of course, double entry system will be used. Bali, there should always be a debit. For every transaction, there is always a debit and a credit entry. So actually, I have another example here, no? That the one that we're going to use for the entire cycle, no? For the complete cycle, I only used one example para masabtan and complete cycle from cycle number 1 up to cycle number 10. Okay, note that the rules of debit double entry system are observed in each transaction. 2 or more accounts affected by each transaction. The sum of debits for every transaction equals the sum of the credits. You have to take note of that, no? Di ba remember, diri sa ako tagpakita sa ijo, kung i-add nimo ini sa compound entry, this is 60,000, no? 55 plus 5, your debit totals is 60, while your credit totals 15 plus 45 is also 60. So pareho sa financial transaction worksheet that in every line, there is always equality to be maintained, no? For every transaction. So I have also a video reference here for you to have an additional information or knowledge about the preparation of the journal entries. Okay, now let's have an example, no? of transactions and how we record each transaction. On May 1, Maria Concepcion Jennifer Perez Manalo is a social entrepreneur from the South. She is into a lot of interesting causes. Her fine taste is preeminent, such that she is considered an authority in planning weddings. So, wedding planner ba dyan si Manalo? Upon the advice and prodding of an esteemed colleague, Bendelin Landico, no, actually Landicho or Landico, Perez Manalo decided to organize her wedding consultancy. She invested $250,000 into this entity. So you have here the transaction analysis. So analysis assets increased, no? Why? Because nag-investment si Manalo ng cash, no? Na 250,000. So what happened to cash? Specific account actually is cash, no? Under assets that's being analyzed to be increased. And also the owner's equity or the capital account is increased by the transaction. So that's why you have a debit entry here for cash and the credit entry to Perez Manalo Capital. And the amount are recorded on the debit and the credit side respectively. Take note, class, I have just identified here na A, OE or owner's equity or capital account, no, for purposes of analysis only. For your guide, no, that cash is actually an asset, no, that is being affected. And also, the other account affected is an owner's equity or a capital account. Guide na siya. So when you perform in your assignments or exams, dapat waya na dyan naka-enclose in parentheses ang A sa non-OE. Just simply, atong debit to cash and Perez Manalo. Just like, dili sa taas, ana na siya, no? Wayay aton identification or analysis kung what is the account classification of that account that you have debited or credited. Okay. So rules, increases in assets are recorded by debits. Remember, kung anija normal, di ba remember that the normal balance of cash is a debit, or of assets is debit, then kay nag-increase man ng cash, so buti pa sabot, the entry to cash is a debit entry. Then also at the same time, increases in owner's equity are recorded by credits because in the accounting equation, that capital account increases, diba? Said increases capital or owner's equity. So meaning to say, since it is an increase, so the entry should also be a credit. So now we have a debit and a credit entry. The debit entry is cash and the credit entry is Perez Manalo Capital. So take note that the amount is also written on each column or each money column of the account, no? And then entry increases in assets is recorded by debit to cash, increases in is credited to cash. Is credited to Perez Manalo Capital. Na cash na may noon, class. So the capital account of a proprietor is recorded as follows: initial investment and additional, the one that I've said, no? That ang capital account is recorded using natin initial investment and additional investment of the proprietor. And then it's credited to the family name of the proprietor succeeded by a comma and the word capital. So sa Perez Manalo, actually pwede dili na dyan yung middle name ibutang, pwede ra Manalo Capital. Lamang kay the book really introduces that it's Perez Manalo Capital. But as I've said, in reality, kung ako dyan business, it's only written as Tuso Capital. Dili na kon Bisero Tuso Capital. Personal withdrawals of the proprietor is debited to the family name of the proprietor succeeded by a comma. And the word withdrawals, it's always with S. Take note, Dili withdrawal, it is withdrawals. So Perez is gyapon pa family name, Perez Manalo, comma, then space, withdrawals. Take note again that the first letter of the account title is always in capital. Next transaction. Rent paid in advance. Kibali nagbayad ng renta in advance, no? Because di ba kasagaran kung magrenta ka ng space, ajuan mga jud ko gani in advance, sanan maajuan pa ko ng deposit. Of course, no? When it's only in advance, so we record it. For example, on May 1 ko rented office space and paid 2 months rent in advance. So analysis, the asset increased and at the same time, the asset decreased. Okay. In the form, ano man dyan na asset increase? In the form of prepaid rent. Kaya pa man mo siya magamit. You paid it, it's an asset that is being affected also at the same time. And also, the asset also is decreased in this transaction. So the asset increased is the prepaid rent account, no? Why? O naman prepaid man o man dili man rent expense? Because it is an advance. You record the expense only when you use the office space. Lamang kay pag tagajuan man ko ng advance, so you have to record it as a prepaid rent. But at the end of the month, you have to record the rent expense, reversing the rent, the advance rent, the prepaid rent for the applicable month only. Since 2 months sa ini, in 2 months time, waya na prepaid rent. Okay, because you have already recorded the rent expense account as an adjusting entry, of course. Rules, increases in assets are recorded by debits. Decreases in assets are recorded also by credits. So as I said, if the normal balance of that account is debit, decreases would be the reverse or the opposite, no, which is credit. So debit to prepaid rent for 8,000 and credit to cash. Again, I would like to emphasize that all credits are indented from the debit. A certain space. Dapat gajud tuod class, no? For information, when you prepare the journal entries, tanan debit na aligned sa kada pizza, no? Aligned ang tanan debit. Sanan upong sab ang tanan credit. Dili pwede na ang credit ari na sa nag-advance or ano ba? No, basta kay upong dapat ang tanan debit and upong sa tanan credit. Kung sa for example, May 1, tapos sa ubos May 2, dapat ang debit sa May 1 sanan sa May 2 upong, no, linya aligned. And the credit in May 1 and the credit in May 2 upong subsidya. So that is how you record the transaction in a general journal. Take note, class, that accounting always is an art. Nakita nako sa ijo assignment na nagpaya-paya ka mo ng karas-karas. Dati isa, naton ako na-checkan na joy ija na saya ni entry isa taghimo class, tagkaras-karas. Di ba remember, kung nasaya ka mo, I told you na himuan ra nijo nan isa ka, you have a line across the amount and then you write the correct amount on top. Small ones na dili na siya mo overlap sa ija entry na naguna. Okay? O amount na naguna. So that is how you record. Or, di ba I ask you to use pencil in your answer, in the preparation of your answer, kaya para kung mag-erase ka or kung nasaya ka, kaya pag tanaw ni mo, pangupya ni mo, uy, lahi man ang imo answer, so mag-erase ka. Para dili obvious na nangupya ka, naggamit ko tana ng pencil that you can easily erase. Diba? Or, as I've said, you use the liquid eraser or aton gani correction tape, no? Or correction fluid. So, there were some asking, pwede ba ball pen? Oh, why not? Lamang kaya, as I've said, kung masaya ka, malipa, no? Mas lipa. Mas gana ka kung pencil. In reality, ano may gamit class? Ball pen na, of course, no? ballpen na, of course, dili na kung pencil. Because we have to assume that in real life or in actual businesses, they are already expert in the field in preparing the journal entries. Again, you take note the alignment of all debits for all transactions and alignment also for all credits and also alignment also for the explanations. Next, note issued for cash. So you have there, Maria Concepcion Manalo issued a promissory note for a 210,000 loan from Metro Bank. This availment will be used for the acquisition of a service vehicle. The note carries a 20% interest per annum. The arrangement with the bank is that both the interest and the principal are payable in full in 1 year. So kibali, wala pa interest, no, kung magbayad-bayad ka ng hinay-hinay, but then, kung gusto niyo mo bayaran, pwede ra sa gihapon sa bayaran in 1 year at the end of the year or in 1 year period only. So what is being increased here or what are the accounts affected? Of course, there is a notes payable or an increase in cash. Kaya nakadawat man ko ng kwarta, no? So from the bank or the bank issued you a check that is again a cash account, another form of a cash account. So the asset here is increased in the form of cash and liabilities here is also increased kay nangutang mangkaw in the form of notes payable, no? So take note that the normal balance of assets is debit. So the entry to cash here is debit and the entry to liabilities since the normal balance is credit and also since the liabilities account to the notes payable account is increased, then the entry to notes payable is a credit entry. So we have here the transaction below, no, debit to cash and credit to notes payable. Of course, for the same amount. Kaya dapat, as I've said, dapat the debits should always be equal to credits. Next, on May 2, hired an office assistant and account executive, each with a 7,800 monthly salary, or each is to receive 300 pesos per day for the 26-day work month. No entry is necessary at this point because they started work immediately. Okay. Kung mag-hire ba dyan ka ng tao, bisan pag-signing ng contract, is there entry to be recorded? Well, yeah, no? Because there's no source document that you can support. Ay, ang kontrata is a contract, already a source document. It may be, no? But then since there is no performance of work yet made by those hired assistant and account executive, then there's nothing to record, no? So when you hire people, there's no entry to be recorded. But when you pay their salaries at the end of quincena or on a monthly basis, then there should now be a financial transaction to be recorded because you have to debit, of course, expense, no, applicable to their salaries and the credit to cash because you pay them in cash. Next, the service vehicle you acquire on May 4. On May 4, acquired service vehicle kono for 420,000. Okay. Actually, class, in this transaction, it is vague kung nagbayad ba siya ng cash or waya. Because when you acquired, pwede mo siya utangon, di ba? So, but then the assumption here in the problem, tag-assume ng author ng book na tagbayaran ng cash, no? But actually, in reality, class, this can also be construed as a payment. And the payment, alternative payment, is not cash, but an accounts payable account. Okay, let's say let's just use, no? Whatever is the example given by the author. So the asset here increased in the form of service vehicle and the account service vehicle, or in the discussion of the account titles, it is a transportation equipment, no? So this is a service vehicle. But as I've said, for a sole proprietorship class, you can always name an account title on your own. But, no, bisan sa imo in a layman's terms, you can use a layman's terms, but your accountant conducting the audit will be translating it into a universal account title that is acceptable in the accounting parlance. Okay? So assets is increased. So the value received, kung ato balikon, the value received here is service vehicle. So the debit entry is service vehicle. And the credit entry is cash. So why cash? Credit, because the cash account here is decreased. So the entry to cash account is credit. So for the debit to 420 and the credit also 420,000. Next, paid Prudential Guarantee and Assurance Incorporated for 14,400 for a 1-year comprehensive insurance coverage on the service vehicle. Kibalit nag-insure ni dyan sakyanan na ija tagpalit. So the asset here is increased in the form of prepaid insurance because the insurance is good for 1 year. I mean, the insurance coverage is good for 1 year. So we have to distribute the expense for the next 12 months from the date of acquisition to expense. And then another asset here, di kayo magbayad man ng cash, or again, as I've said, the problem is silent. Paid man, so dapat cash, gadyo anija decrease. So the account affected here is an increase in asset in the form of prepaid insurance, and then also a decrease in asset in the form of cash. So your debit entry is the prepaid insurance and your credit entry is cash. So take note, no, ang ako explanation. Take note also, class, that you don't copy, no? You don't copy the explanation given in the transaction. That will not be given consideration or credit, or I will not check that one. So dapat, you have to explain the transaction or the entry in a brief and concise manner. And do not forget also to write, since it is an explanation, it is in sentence form, that at the end of every sentence, there is always a period. So sa explanation, dapat joy is a period after the last word of your explanation. Next, acquired office equipment from Fair and Square Emporium for 60,000, paying 15,000 in cash and the balance for the next month. So note the compound entries needed for this transaction because there will be now 1 debit and 2 credits. Like when you acquire equipment, the value received there is the office equipment. So it's an asset. So the entry, since it is the asset here is increased, so the entry to office equipment is a debit entry. And while there will be 2 credits, no, that is being affected in the transaction, the cash that you paid, no, cash is decreased in the transaction, and the increase in liability. So since there is no note, no, there's no promissory note issued, then the account title for a liability, for this liability, is only an accounts payable account. So to record, di ba nag-debit kita na the increase in asset, which is office equipment. So we debit office equipment, and we for 60,000, and we credit cash for 15,000. No, kaya nag-decrease man ng cash in this transaction, kaya nagbayad man ng cash. And then since nag-increase ang liability or accounts payable, and its normal balance is credit man, so we credit accounts payable for the remaining balance. So 60,000 minus 15,000. So the 45,000 would be your credit to accounts payable. So dyan, no, the entry there, that the debit to office equipment for 60,000 and the credit to cash and accounts payable for 15,000 and 45,000 respectively. So as I've said, take note that the debits here has a total of 60,000 and the credits are equal to 60,000 also. On May 8, purchase supplies on credit for 18,000 from San Jose Merchandising. So what is the value received here? The para ato debit entry, supplies, no? And the value parted with is credit ng utang. So the value parted with is a accounts payable account. So the credit entry, as I've said, the value received is always given a debit entry consideration, and the value parted with is always given a credit entry consideration. So we have here, for the journal entry example, we debit supplies for 18,000 and we credit accounts payable for 18,000. You take note because the explanation there is not acquisition of office equipment, nasaya ko class. Dapat acquisition of supplies or office supplies or supplies only will do. Okay? Next, on May 9, paid San Jose Merchandising, 10,000 for the amount owed. Kibali nagbayad siya. Remember, haman dyan reference aton San Jose Merchandising. So tanawon nato, haman dapit ang San Jose Merchandising na transaction. Come on. Siguro basin ijara dyan, one class, na nagbayad si dyan ng utang. Sige lang. Okay. So kibali nagbayad si dyan ng utang, partial rakuno of the amount owed. So, anija utang, siguro kung pilay amount, no, we have ma-disclose, there is a problem. But with the activity that I have given to you, class, there was always a reference to what, no? Diri lamang waya ako makakita na Joy San Jose Merchandising, that original transaction. Okay. So, kaya nagbayad man ng utang, the value received here is nagamayan ang imo utang. And the utang that you have, the value received, as I have said, would always be given a debit consideration. So since it is the accounts payable account that is being decreased in this transaction, then your debit entry or the value received in this transaction, then your debit entry is accounts payable. And of course, always class, kung diyan mo bayaran, it is always a credit to cash, no? Kung diyan mo bayaran. Okay, next. Revenues earned and collected. So May 10, coordinated and finalized simple bridal arrangements for 3 couples and collected fees of 8,800 per couple. Services include prospecting and selecting the church and reception location, couturier, caterer, car service, flowers, souvenirs, and invitations. So, ano man dyan, the assets increase, kaya nakakollect manan aton 8,800, no? And the value parted with would be your income or the service income. I don't know what is the account here. So let's check what is the account used in the problem. Consulting revenues. So an IJA income account in this problem is consulting revenues. So an increase in asset in the form of cash for 8,800, and also increase in consulting revenues for 8,800. So the value received here is cash, or debit entry to cash, debit to cash, and a credit to consulting revenues, which has, remember that income has a normal balance of credit. So para mas dali ra, the explanation, arang nakahamok, mas pwede ra perform consultancy services or perform services will do. Para uniform na, no? Next, May 13, paid salaries for 16,600. The entity pays salaries every 2 Saturdays. Refer to calendar, that is already in chapter 4. So nagbayad man ng salaries. So the value received there is the payment or aton trabaho, the work done by your employees. So that is a salaries expense. That the expense account has a normal balance of debit. Since it is increased in this transaction, so the salaries expense is debited. And of course, now ako, basta paid, automatic, your credit entry is cash. Also for 6,600. So you have there, salaries expense, and then cash. Take note also here class, no, to need account classification of salaries expense, that it affects owner's equity, that the specific account is supposed to be an expense. Dili kon income, dapat expense. Nasaya na sa doong class. Saya. Anyway. May 15, the entity is earning additional revenues. The entity is earning additional revenues by referring consulting clients to friendly hotels, caterers, printers, and couturiers. Received 10,000 pesos advance fees for 3 clients referred. So the value received there is cash, no, in the form of cash. So the debit entry is cash, and the credit entry is consulting revenues for the same amount of your debit amount. Ano yung gamit mo dyan, unearned revenues? Actually, class, kaya naka-receive naman siya dapat, no? Pero, unearned. Siguro, kaya advance payment ra. Pero actually, when you record services, no? For a service nature of business, dapat cash basis mga class and recording. No? Sa the point of view of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Since siguro ijaratag credit because it is not yet earned, kaya pa man sila maka-perform ng service actually. Uya pa man gajud ang clients maka aton ijaratag refer ng mga clients. Siya pa man gajud mo bayan, no? So that would be kay basin kun mo so sakto sab, no? Kay kun basin ba di na mo dajon, no, in that hotel, then there is an obligation of that consultant to return the money that he received as advance payment for referrals. Sige, so sige lamang. A liability kung unearned, kidili pa man sa income, so it would be an unearned referral revenues. Ano yung account mo dyan tagamit class is referral revenues for all accounts earned for referrals. Take note here, class, kung if your explanation, I would like to emphasize here, that the explanation here is sobra sa ija linya. I mean, sa ija alluded. Dili ka pwede mo cross over the posting reference and the amount. No, dili siya pwede. within the account titles and explanation only column. No? So, take note that the aton sumpay no, sa aton first line and explanation naupong na class sa credit entry. No? Kung dili kita maigo ang doon space, no, dadto na ang sumpay nimo dapat maupong sa credit entry. You have to take note of that. May 19, coordinated and finalized elaborate bridal arrangements for 3 couples and billed fees of 12,000 per couple. Additional services includes documents preparation, consultation with the feng shui expert as to the ideal wedding date for prosperity and harmony, and provision for limousine service and honeymoon trip. So the debit here, kay nakahuman naman, nag-bill pa man siya, wala man siya bayari dajon. So it is an accounts receivable. So the asset increased here in the form of accounts receivable, and also the consulting revenues is also increased in this transaction. Next, withdrawal of Perez Manalo withdraw 14,000 for personal expenses. So, do you remember that the normal balance, the value received here is the withdrawal, no? And the value parted with is cash. So, debit 2, do you remember that the normal balance of withdrawal is debit? So, the debit entry here is the Perez Manalo withdrawals. And the credit would be cash because cash here is decreased by the transaction. May 27, again, paid salaries, 7,200. The same entry as we have in the previous transaction. So debit to salaries expense and credit to cash for 7,800. On May 30, received the ICC via telephone bill for 1,400. Kibali nakadawat na si Janan, bill na niya telepono na tagpa-install. So of course, nag-receive pa man ng bill, there was no payment made pa. So there would be an increase in utilities expense. No? The expense account will now be recorded. Bisan niya pa si Ja ka bayari. Kaya naka-receive pa man ka ng bill. But at the time of that period, dapat imo na sa tag-record because it is applicable for the month of May. So debit to utilities expense and credit to accounts payable. Kay utang pa man si Jack. Naka-receive pa man ka ng bill. No? When you pay, amo tayo magbayad ng utang, debit to accounts payable and the credit to cash. In another May 30 transaction, received 24,000 from 2 clients of services for services billed last May 19. So balikan natin on May 19 transaction, what happened there? What was our entry? We debited accounts receivable, no? Kay si Perez Manalo, nag-bill pa man sa clients. Here, tagbayaran na si Jan, nakakolekta na si Jan from the 2 clients, although dili siguro kon full. No, di ba here the accounts receivable amount is 36,000. So dapat mag-decrease ang accounts receivable kaya nakolektahan naman. So your credit here would be accounts receivable, and what you received, of course, is a form of cash. So your cash account here is increased, and your credit is accounts receivable. Remember that both are asset accounts. May 31, settled the electricity bill for 3,000 for the month. Kaina ato ni electric telephone bill, no? Ani na receive. Diri settled, buti pasabot tagbayaran na an electric bill. So debit to utilities expense because the expense account here is decreased. Why utilities expense? If the account title given in the problem class is only utilities expense, but if the problem specifies that there is electric electricity expense or electric expense or light expense, then we debit light expense, dili kon utilities expense. But if the problem uses utilities expense for all utilities, then it should be debited to utilities expense. And a credit, of course, to cash. Kaya nagbayad man, nagsettle man. Take note, the term settled is tagbayaran. Okay? So I have here the summary of all entries, no? Gikan May 1 up to May 31 in summary. So take note, no? After the first May 1 transaction, at on my debit, credit, and explanation, there is a space. This circle mo proceed to the next set of entries. Again, space. Then set of entries, then space. Ana siya, ha? Kung without space, that is always given a minus 10 points to your score. Notice how recording process is made in General Journal. The debit account title is placed on the left margin of the account titles and explanation column, while the credit column title is recorded in the next row and is indented at least 5 spaces from the debit account title. Actually, this is only a summary of what I have discussed here above, or how I presented the account title, the journal entries above. So I have here another problem. So as I've said, this problem ko no ako gamiton for the 10 example for all account aton 10 step 1 to step number 10. So here, take note, no? So I've said, aton onon pagkopya, kung diyan na gani sa module, dili na ikopya sa notebook, ang kopyaon sa notebook, aton ra mga examples na waya pa diri sa module. Nadyaon na sa video. Okay? Okay, you are told that in the problem, these are the account titles that we're going to use, no? For the problem. I want you to study that one, no? Be careful. I have already an example here of the posting reference that ono man dyan siya, that the cash is posted to the general ledger number 1. Kibali, the assigned page of cash in the general ledger is page number 1. And the Marasigan Capital are page number 36. I just assume this class, no, for you to be able to understand how the posting reference is filled up in the general journal. Okay. What happened? Hello. Okay, of your assignment, no, I will activate it later. That aton example na ako taghatag sa T account will also now, and financial transaction worksheet will now be prepared with a journal entry, no? Ako siya tagamit kay because you have already prepared the analysis in the preparation of the T account. And the financial transaction worksheet that I have shown to you as an example. So mas dali ra kan himuon, no? So you prepare, no? I will activate, as I said, I will activate this one in the assignment. So I have here defined the account titles that you're going to use in the preparation of the journal entries. So please take a picture. Actually, diyan na may ijo inituod, no? An inirakan requirement aton the account titles that you're going to use in the recording phase, no? So please take a picture of the requirement. Okay, next. Lesson number 2, the posting of the journal entries to the ledger. As I've said, diri kanina, no, sa inin ako taghatag sa agent na example, another example for the journal entries. Nandiyan ko yung posting reference. Now, how this is actually coming from the general ledger. Okay. The ledger. The ledger is a grouping of the entity's account is referred to as a ledger. Although some firms may use various ledgers to accumulate certain detailed information, all firms have a general ledger. Tanan, no? Diyan ko yung general ledger. A general ledger is the reference book of the accounting system. And is used to classify and summarize transactions and prepare data for basic financial statements. So, ang ledger ba dyan, class, ang mag-prepare and everything for the output, the final output of the recording phase in accounting. So, the accounts in the general ledger are classified into two general groups. You have the balance sheet of the permanent accounts, the asset liabilities, and the owner's equity or capital account, no? And the income or the temporary accounts of the income and expense account, no? The owner's equity accounts here, class, includes withdrawal, no? The owner's withdrawal, for example, for Manalo, Perez Manalo capital and sa under owner's equity, and also the Perez Manalo withdrawals are part of the owner's equity because the income and expense account, though they affect owner's equity or capital, they are prepared as separate page in the general ledger. No? So again, the permanent accounts, balance sheet, or the statement of financial position accounts are permanent accounts. And the income statement or the statement of income accounts, the elements of the statement of income accounts are what we call the temporary accounts. Because why are they called temporary? Because at the end of accounting period, i-close siya. Then the balance in the general ledger will becomes zero at the end of an accounting period. Pero the permanent accounts will be forwarded for the next or to the next accounting period. So that's why they are called permanent accounts. Kay dili man siya i-close. I-forward naman siya sa next accounting period. Like, kung ang cash, no? Ang cash is a balance sheet account or a statement of financial position account. So, kung ang cash ni mo na balance na 10 pesos, di ba, it becomes the beginning balance na ang ending ni mo na 10 pesos na cash for the current year becomes the beginning for the next accounting period or for the following year. No, ana siya. But for income, for example, kung dyan mo consulting revenues for the year 2021, pag sugod ng 2022, zero gano'n siya class because those accounts, the income statement accounts are closed at the end of 2021. So tanan income and expense are closed at the end of an accounting period. Only the permanent accounts are remain, no? Or only the permanent accounts remain in the general or has a balance in the general ledger at the end of an accounting period. So this is the ledger, no? So aton sa general journal, duha ka column sa debit credit column. But now, daon ay ato balance column. For every transaction that we are going to post from the general journal to the general ledger, kinahanglan, there should now be a balance. No? Always, there will be a running balance. Unlike sa T account, the balance will only be determined at the end of all transactions that are being posted to that account. Diba? Pero here, the balance is always determined at the end of every entry that you post to the ledger. Chart of accounts. It is a listing of all the accounts and their account numbers in the ledger. It's known as the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is arranged in the financial statement order. Aton the statement of financial position order. Aton una ang assets, followed by liabilities and the capital, and then the income and expense account are last. Okay? So when analyzing transactions, the accountant refers to the chart of accounts to identify the pertinent accounts to be increased or decreased. If an appropriate account title is not listed in the chart, an additional account may be added, no? So, pwede actually, you can create your own account, but as I've said, only the certified public accountants can translate it into a universal financial statement. So, these are examples, una ang assets, no? And the account codes, no? Of every account. Of course, you can create your own. You can create your own coding, no? You can expand. Pwede 1,000, no? Magsugod, etc., etc. Why would you use 1,000? Maybe because actually in my experience with the bank class, an AMO code is always a 8-digit code, no? Account code for every account titles. Because in anticipation for another account titles that may be introduced, no? Or that may be encountered by the bank in the future. So initially, you can start with all this. No, you can even copy this one, no, for purposes of uniform presentation of your journal entries. Okay, so the posting to the ledger, or step number 3, which is the posting to the ledger. Posting means transferring the amounts from the journal to the appropriate accounts in the ledger. Debits in the journal are posted as debits in the ledger, and credits in the journal are credits in the ledger. So the steps are illustrated as follows. Transfer the date of the transaction from the journal to the ledger. So date, unahon, no? And then transfer the page number from the journal to the journal reference. Aton kanina class, ani dyan nakita sa journal, sa general journal, of course, ang posting reference is from the ledger. Kung uno si dyan na page sa ledger, imutag, butang. Here, sa ledger sub, ang posting reference should now be kung uno na page number at na entry, no? Sa imo general journal. Remember that the general journal class is continuous. Dili si Jado nag-assign ko na dapat ini for the month of May. No. Sumpay-sumpay ra dyan si Jado class. Only one book for the general journal, for your journal entries. That's why, kung let's say, kung napuyo up to 12 months, syempre, ang cash maybe will be on the last page or just sa first page or in the middle page. Things like that. So you need to have also to identify what page is your entry, the reference of your entry for that account. Okay? And then post the debit and credit, post the debit figure for the debit column and the credit figure for the credit column in the ledger. So enter the account number, the posting reference column of the account of the journal once the figure has been posted to the ledger. So this is an example from the general journal. Kung tag-post na to atong first entry. So kung for example, page 1 man kinta dyan, kay example ra page 1, no, actually kay Mayo naman dyan, pwede kayo so page 10 na dyan si dyan, no? So dapat diri sa butangan ni dyan ng page general GL GJ G, capital G and capital J, general journal, that represents general journal, page number 1. Ana siya, dapat sa posting reference. So take note, there is a general ledger class that after each transaction, for example, there is a balance for the previous month, for the month of April, kibali kung continuation ang May, dapat nakabutang unbalanced, atong balance forwarded. Okay? So kung napuno na siguro ang page, no, amo dyan ang balance, there is always a need for you to write a balance forwarded. Or, dili kung napuno ang page in reference to the previous month, because dili man mo isumpay, no, sa general ledger, so dapat may balance forwarded. But of course, this is always representative of the beginning balance of the accounts. So dapat dyan i-balance, kung dyan i-balance dito na previous month, or a previous page, no? And then the transaction. So take note that diretso nandiyo ay balance, no? So cash, so that balance for cash, this is for cash, no? Take note that this is the general ledger for cash. Page 1 si dyan na general ledger. And for example, the code ng Perez Manalo is 310, capital is 310, page 1, dapat dili sa page 1. I mean, dapat dili man gud sa pwede mag page 1, dapat page 2, page 10 ni siya, page 30, no? Ana siya. So, ana siya dapat ang posting reference. So, kay credit man ang capital na entry on May 1, so tagbutang nato ang amount sa credit sa general ledger, and then the balance is also determined. Take note, class, that for account title, di ba here, dili na to ma-determine if the balance of that account is a debit or a credit. But take note, as I've said, you need to be expert already in identifying what is the normal balance of that account. So kung cash, debit siya, so meaning to say that the balance is debit, no? And 250,000 there in cash na general ledger is a debit because the normal balance of cash is debit. And for Perez Manalo Capital, the balance there is a credit because the normal balance of that account is a credit. Okay, ledger accounts after posting. At the end of an accounting period, the debit or credit balance of each account must be determined to enable us to come up with a trial balance. Each account balance is determined by footing all the debits and credits. If the sum of the account debits is greater than the sum of the credits, the account has a debit balance. No? So, kibali, kung base dyan case kasi kuno naman negative or the reverse, imbis masobra pang ija-debit kaysa credit, diri class sa general ledger, dili nato i-total ang debit sa ng credit, unlike sa T-account. Sa T-account, ato i-total ang debit sa ng credit for us to be able to determine the balance. Dinhi man good class, dyan ay balance na column. O sa dili na kinahanglan nato i-total ang debit sa ng credit. Then if the sum of the credits is greater, the account has a credit balance. Ana siya. So this is an example, no, of kansino man ini atong kan Perez Manalo. So this is the example of the ledger of Perez Manalo. You try it by yourselves, of course, please, so that you would learn. And also I have presented here, attached here a video, no, a video from YouTube for you to be able to have a more knowledge about the posting to the ledger. Kaya anak siya. Sa ledger class, kung way entry, i-prepare ba? Butangan ba? Ma-assign ba? Yes. Sa T-account ba? Bisan way entry, dapat himuan ba? Bisan kung taghatagan si Janan specific account title in a problem? Yes. Bisan way suyod ang account, kinahanglan himuan gadyon ng T-account or ng ledger page, no? Mag-assign gadyon ng ledger page. Ana siya. Why? If you don't prepare kay YEJ entry, the tendency you will not be given points. Kay ang ako manggod class manner in checking the ledger is per balance of the per account and the balance of the account. I don't check on the per items, no, because it is understood that I already itemize your entries in checking your entries in the general journal. So when you post it in the ledger, ang ako ra i-check 5 points for every correct balance. And of course, dapat or entries kay there are really cases class na mangupya ra gajud class na mahitabo bisan sa jup na ang entries niya saktuan ija total, ang ija balance. Ako class, I usually are particular with the entries, no? For you to be given 5 points. Dapat everything is correct for a 5 points. Like in cash, alang kahamok entries, 5 points siya, no? Anton, dili na ako magtanaw sa balance. And of course, as I said, tanaw sa nako ang details. And for the accounts receivable, bisang gamay ra siya, I will always look at into the balance, no? 5 points gyapon na siya. For no entries like there is accumulated depreciation, ya pa may EJ entry because ya pa may mag-end an accounting period. That is also 5 points, no? Even though YI entry, basta nag-prepare ka ng T account or ledger for the account title. Anak siya. So I have here the posting also to the ledger for the Dr. Nick Marasigan problem at another example para masamok ito knowledge on how to prepare the journal entries at the same time, how to prepare the ledger. And of course, the last topic to be discussed in this module would be the preparation of the trial balance. Actually, class, the trial balance is just like as I said, pareho ra si dyan na natun. Mag-balance kita sa financial transaction worksheet after non-EJA column. No? For each column, di ba, we put. So when we determine that if it's balanced, so we can determine and we can also vouch that our work is correct. The preparation of the trial balance. The trial balance is a list of all accounts with their respective debit or credit balances. In summary of dito sa general ledger class, aton mga balances nato nataghimo, no, ato sa ledger, and ito balance is now transferred into a trial balance. So this is a formal statement. Dili kung pareho ito sa financial transaction worksheet, nato total. Here, dyan a heading. You take note that there is now a heading. Aton, I always give 5 points to the heading. You take note sa financial transaction worksheet. So take note that sa accounting, if there is always a heading, that is always given 5 points consideration. So it is prepared to verify the equality of debits and credits in the ledger at the end of the accounting, at the end of each accounting period, or at any time the postings are updated. The procedures in the preparation of a trial balance follows. So list the account titles, kung ato ko na i-list ang account titles in numerical order. Kung dyan ay account code. Kung wala sa account code, so of course, remember that aton una ang assets, then followed by liabilities, then capital, withdrawals, then income and expense will follow. And then add the debit and credit columns. I-add ko na nato ang debit and credit columns and compare the totals if the debit and credit is equal. Then if your debit and credit is equal, the totals of your debit and credit is equal. So meaning to say your work is balanced. So it doesn't mean that your work is correct, no? Okay, you might be posting it to another account, no, another column, then of course it will cause an error. Later on, I will teach you how to identify errors. The trial balance is a control device that helps minimize accounting errors. When the totals are equal, the trial balance is in balance. So this equality provides an interim proof of the accuracy of the records, but it does not signify the absence of errors. As I've said, bisan balance siya class, bisan wrong ani jo account title tagamit, mo balance man gajud kay debit credit man, no? But if the moment that you posted in the ledger ang ijo credit entry to a debit column in the general ledger, then it will cause an error. Pero kung bisan wrong ang mo account title class, the trial balance would always be balanced. Basta sa correct ra gihapon ito pag-post. Ang debit sa debit, ang credit sa credit. Even if the account title that you used is wrong. Okay? So for example, if the bookkeeper kuno failed to record payment of rent, the trial balance of course is balanced. Kaya waya may imo debit sa ng credit, no? And then the trial balance for the registration of balance is arranged accordingly. So darita at the trial balance for the example ng Nick Marasiga, wedding are asked sa class. So you have there the heading, no? Do not forget that there is always the heading. Account code, you write account code if the problem gives account code, but if the problem does not give you account code, it may be omitted. No? Pwede rin siya waya na title ng account code. Pero kung dyan, kinahanglan na dyan butangan. Then account titles, the peso sign, no? The peso sign is only written on the first entry for the debit column. And also on the last entry, the total columns of the debit columns. And also on the first entry on the credit column and the last entry or the totals of your credit column. Ana ra siya. Ha? In the trial balance are those accounts without balances. Dapat isuyat. Pwede siya dili na isuyat. No? But for purposes ra lamang of arranging, no, that all accounts here actually is used later on, you would learn that it will really be filled up later on. So I have a video reference how to prepare the trial balance. So this is the solution of the trial balance to the Nick Marasigan example, another example that I gave you. Okay, locating errors. An inequality in the totals of the debits and credits will automatically signal the presence of an error. These errors include error in posting a transaction to the ledger. So, kibaligikan sa, you have there, number one is an erroneous amount was posted to the account. So, sa job ang amount, no? Tagbutang. Kita for example sa general ledger, a general journal, 50 pesos, pero pagbutang na nimo sa ledger, sakto debit or credit, pero ang amount mo na transfer is 5 pesos kinta, for example. Ana siya. So that is an error. A debit entry was posted to the credit or vice versa. So, kung posible sa badaya, no, kung sa pagdali-dali na ang debit imo na tag-post sa credit dito sa debit entry diri sa general journal, imo na tag-post diri sa ledger ni na credit, no, or vice versa. Ang credit tagbutang sa debit, no. You should really be cautious in the posting because the trial balance, as I've said, will signify that there might be a presence of an error. Next, a debit or credit posting was omitted. Natunuya gajud nimo. My journal entry, no, sa general journal journal entry, ang debit and credit pero waya nimo ma-record sa general ledger. Og sa when you post transaction to the ledger, kinahanglan imo na post na dapat butangan imo ng tick mark. Any tick mark, pwede X, pwede check, or pwede amuranan reverse check, no? At kibali paubos siya instead of pataas na check. Ana siya. So dapat that signifies na na-post na jaon nimo na entry dito sa ledger. Okay, that is the third one, that the debit or credit posting may be omitted. Number two, error in determining the account balances. A balance was incorrectly computed o nasa job ka ba pag-add sa non-minus, no, in determining the balance of an account. Then a balance was entered in the wrong balance column. Pag-transfer na nimo sa trial balance, imbis na debit siya dito sa imo ledger na balance, kay because di naman lagi nimo ma-determine, di naman pareho sa T account na mahibawan nimo kung debit o credit ani siya balance, kay diri pa-brightay na sa ledger. But of course, for purposes of discussion and accounting succeeding, we will always be using the ledger. No? Dili na kon, at the general ledger, dili na kon, T account. So, ana siya, no? Kibali, for example, ang cash, debit man kita, for example, na butang nimo siya sa credit, hinuon na column sa trial balance. So, that is what is meant by a balance was entered in the wrong balance column. Error in preparing the trial balance. One of the columns of the trial balance was incorrectly added, no? Kibali pag-add nimo itong total sa sa trial balance na debit column or credit column nasa job ka pag-add. So you have to, the first thing job class is you have to check first, no? Again, recompute or mas maradyo gadyo kon Excel gadyo ang himuon class kay kung di na gadyo, wala na gadyo error ng footing. Ang problema ra kan kung Excel mo gamiton, ang pag-range ra kan basta niya ani mo ma-appeal ang last entry. Usually, first or last entry ang gadyo problema. Kung mag-Excel ka tapos pag-range nimo yan mo ma-appeal ang first or the last entry. Then the amount of the account balance was incorrectly recorded on the trial balance. So dito sa general ledger, 50 pesos pag-abot nimo sa ledger up sa trial balance, taghimo na sa nimo ng 5 pesos, no? So kaina gikan sa general journal, pag-post nimo sa ledger, nahimo ng lain amount. And this time, gikan sa general ledger, pag-post nimo sa trial balance, pag-transfer nimo sa trial balance, lahi na sa amount, different from the balance in the general ledger. The amount of an account balance is correctly recorded on the trial balance. Okay, that was the one that I discussed earlier. And the debit balance was recorded in the trial balance as a credit or vice versa, or a balance was omitted entirely. So kibali waya gadyo nimo ma-transfer, or kung a balance was omitted entirely, gikan sa general ledger waya nimo sa ma-transfer sa trial balance. Kung mula sa kita na debit balance was recorded on the credit balance as a credit and a credit as a debit, no? So kibali, as I've said, atong kanina, kung gikan general ledger, imo mabutang sa debit na dapat credit, or a credit na butang nimo sa debit. Ana siya. What is the most efficient approach in locating an error? The following procedures, when done in sequence, may save considerable time and effort in locating errors. Prove the addition of the trial balance columns by adding these columns in the opposite direction. I don't buy this suggestion, no? Or consideration or procedure, because dili man kita comfortable in footing or in adding from bottom to top, no? Kung mo lang ta reverse direction, and di ba we usually add from top to bottom. Ang instruction number 1 na kinahanglan ko no i-reverse from bottom to top. So again, if you're comfortable with that, then fine. But ako gadyo, I don't usually reverse the footing from bottom to up. If the error does not lie in addition, determine the exact amount by which the trial balance is out of balance. The amount of discrepancy is often a clue to the source of error. If the discrepancy is divisible by 9, this suggests either a transposition or reversing the order of the numbers, or a slide, moving of the decimal point. Okay, for example, kuno, assume that the cash account is 21,750. But in copying the balance into the trial balance, the figures are transposed and written as 21,570. Kibali ko nagkabali-balik class ang amount, gikan sa 21,750, ang nabalina nimo ang 5,775, nahimo ra kanimo pag-post dito sa trial balance sa 21,570. So that is a transposition error. If that is so, that is divisible by that. The difference of the error is divisible by 9. And the resulting error amounted to 180 is divisible by 9. Okay, so another common error is the slide or incorrect placement of the decimal point, or is a placement of the amount. Like, as when 21,750 is copied as 2,175. Now, waya na ang 0 sa 50, no? So that is a slide. Nakuhaan nan isa ka space, no? Isa ka decimal, no? Isa ka placement, sorry. The resulting discrepancy again is divisible by 9. Assume that the office equipment account has a debit balance of 42,000. But it is erroneously listed in the credit column of the trial balance. This will cause, okay, so lahi na sa badya ini. Lahi na siguro na item class. Sige ra. Assume that the office equipment account has a debit balance. And then has a debit balance of 42,000, but it is erroneously listed in the credit column of the trial balance. Instead the debit because office equipment has a normal balance of debit. This will cause a discrepancy of 2 times 42,000 or 84,000, or a double posting or a double effect will be the error. Since such errors are recording as debit in the credit column are common, it is advisable after determining the discrepancy in the trial balance total to scan the columns of the amount equal to exact 1/2 of the discrepancy. Or you divide it by 2, an error. Kung divisible by 2, buti pa sabot, it may be nasa job ka na ang debit na butang sa credit or ang credit na butang sa debit column sa trial balance. No? Kung double ang effect. It is also advisable to look over the transactions for an item of the exact amount of the discrepancy. An error may have been made by recording the debit side of the transaction and forgetting to enter the credit side. Okay. So, posible, no? Next is compare the accounts and amounts in the trial balance with that in the ledger. Kung dili ka dyan mo ma-locate aton sa is it divisible by 9, mag-foot ka, or divisible by 2, or double effect, no? Then you do compare the accounts and amount in the trial balance. So, balik ta. Skip tracing na. So, balik ta dito sa ledger, isa-isahon kung sakto ang imo pagbutang na amount dito sa trial balance, sa ija balance sa ledger, no? Anak siya. Be certain that no account is omitted or account balance is omitted. So, wayay imo na miss, no? Na waya nimo mabutang dito sa trial balance na joy balance sa general ledger. Number 4, recompute the balance of each ledger account. True. Balik sa proseso, recompute the balance of the ledger. Kaya basin daon dito nimo na sa job. Then, number 5, trace all postcodes kung waya dili gihapon. So, from 1 to 4, balik kita sa ato journal entry sa posting nato sa ledger. So, balikon isa-isa. Okay? Anak siya. Tedious, no? When there is an error in the trial balance. Note that even when the trial balance is in balance, the accounting records will still contain errors. So, balance trial balance we simply proves that as recorded, debits and credits are equal. The following errors may not be detected by a trial balance. Failure to record or post a transaction. So kung ako ka-record ng transaction, ako kahimo ng journal entry, or aton nakahimo ko ng journal entry pero waya nimo ma-post sa ledger, aton debit and credit, duha ka dyan, no? Na you have omitted a debit and credit entry. So that will still balance. Your trial balance will still balance. Pero kung an imo na post debit ra or a credit, isa ra ka buok na jaon, pero debit credit gihapon sa journal, debit credit sa general journal, it will always cause an error. Okay? Number 2, reconciling the same transaction for more than once. So balik-balikon. Recording the same transaction more than once. Buti pasabot, kaduhani mo sa na-record. Bisa na humanakaw, nan-record na naton kita, for example, May 1, na-record na sa mo ito, nakaduhanan ni mo sa pag-record. Take note class, dili gyapon dyan si mag-error sa trial balance. Kung na-record ni mo, bisan twice ni mo sa na-post sa general ledger, mo balance gyapon ang trial balance. But of course, the error there is double posting. Kaya dapat isa ra ka transaction, pag-record ni mo sa ledger, kaduhani mo na butang. Okay? Number 3, recording the entry. Recording an entry but with the same erroneous debit and credit amount. So balance siya. Bisan sa journal amount nimo class, for example 50 pesos, pagbutang nimo sa ledger, ang debit credit nimo pagbutang kung only accounts affected tag 5 pesos ra balance gihapon. Bisan sa journal 50 pesos ang ija entry amount. Okay? Pero kung ang imo debit is 50 pesos pero ang imo credit pag-post sa ledger is 5 pesos, it will cause an error. Number 4, posting a part of the transaction correctly as a debit or credit but to the wrong account. So, siguro sa balance determination, dili gihapon no bisan na sa job ka pag-post sa gikan sa journal to the ledger. Let's say for example, ang cash na record mo sa accounts payable na debit, it will not cause an error in the trial balance, no? Mabalanse gihapon because what you posted is a debit entry also. So ana siya. These are the errors, no? That may not be covered or discovered in the preparation of the trial balance. So as I've said, this is an example of your trial balances. And we will be having an activity. So at the end of this video presentation. You may ask question, class, right after the presentation. Thank you.